Welcome back. Let's turn our attention to the United States, where Donald Trump is being sued by government workers over his administration's plans to dismantle the American aid agency, USAID. The United States Agency for International Development was set up back in 1961 to implement humanitarian aid on behalf of the United States. It had a budget of $40 billion in 2023 and oversees aid in around 130 countries. It employs more than 10,000 people, but reports say Donald Trump plans to keep fewer than 300 of those. President Trump has implemented a 90-day freeze on all foreign assistance on his first day in office, and Elon Musk said of the agency, "We're shutting it down." Well, joining me now is former Special Advisor to the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, Dr. Mukesh Kapila. Dr. Kapila, very good morning to you. There's no two ways about it, are there? These cuts are drastic. This move is very drastic. As somebody who's seen humanitarian crises at the coalface, as you have, Rwanda, Darfur, what's your opinion of what the US is doing?
I think there's no two ways about it, as you say. America is the world's biggest donor, and this is very disruptive, largely because also it is so sudden. And the gap cannot be filled by other donors who should do more, who can do more, but will not do so because they don't want to rub Trump the wrong way up by rushing in to fill the gap left by him. So yes, it's very disruptive. Now, we have to distinguish, however, between humanitarian aid and development, economic and social aid. It's the humanitarian aid side, the aid that goes to wars and disasters and increasingly climate change impacts, that is the most worrying. The economic and development aid is long-term, and perhaps there are different questions we ask there. But USAID and the US Foreign Aid Program typically does both. So I think the way the cuts are implemented has to be looked at in a very selective way. And it's good to see that the Americans are resuming some forms of humanitarian aid very quickly.
Do you acknowledge that many people who work in the industry will acknowledge that there is a lot of inefficiency and waste? And if so, what would you say should be some of the prime candidates for sectors, causes that don't get continued money?
Yes, I'm indeed very sorry to say that over the decades, the aid industry has got very bloated with many multi-billion-dollar organizations, not just in the UN system, but also massive multinational NGOs as well. Also, many aid-dependent countries have come to rely on foreign aid and have made a political choice that if a foreign charity can fund the needs of the people, why should they do it themselves? And that's a very bad thing in terms of the necessity and the sustainability of foreign aid. It has also fed, I think, countries, general populations in donor countries, like in the UK or in the US or around Europe, to take a negative view of foreign aid. I think Trump, as always, is extreme in what he says, but as always, he always has some kernel of truth in what he does in his way. And that is, I think, there needs to be reform of the aid sector. And
so Dr. Kapila, if you were being asked to find efficiencies or make decisions, you had to prioritise the money, what would you cut off?
Well, I would reduce the overheads. I would stop the system whereby donors give money to large organizations who then pass on to medium-sized ones, who then pass on to yet smaller ones. Before a single dollar gets to the ground, lots has been siphoned off. I would also reduce the size of these big organizations because that has huge internal transactional costs. There are coordination issues. There's a lot of competition amongst aid agencies competing with each other instead of collaborating. And donor policies themselves feed some of this patronage and competition, and I would want to reform that as well.
And in terms of the sudden stop order, it's very abrupt, isn't it? These projects have people on the ground, very many projects all over the place that require ongoing funding. What has been the immediate impact of that sudden stop order?
Well, we've seen that in terms of health clinics, say for HIV/AIDS in Africa, suddenly shuttering their doors. We have seen warehouses full of American food aid being locked up. We have seen local aid workers who deliver most of the foreign assistance suddenly being shut out and not paid their salaries. And we've seen Americans serving abroad, suddenly abandoned. So I think the impact is immediate. But to be quite honest with you, I think those who have been implementing these American directives have been a little bit too hasty also. Because we are seeing now, for example, the Americans are revising their position as they realize the absurdity of their orders. But I think many of those who rush to comply with American directives have also, I think, been too hasty. And I think they need to take a little bit of a stand back approach to this and continue to sustain programs which are being funded, and there is money there. It's not suddenly stopped. So I think that much of the chaos has been caused by the aid industry's own malreaction to the American decisions and the fear they have of the US administration.
Dr. Mukesh Kapila, thank you very much for your time with us on Sky News this morning.
Thank you.